Hi and welcome back to All About Hormonal Birth Control. In this series, we discuss the side effects and effects of hormonal contraception, and in this episode, we are going to continue to talk about birth control and mental health. This episode is a continuation of last week's episode, so if you haven't already watched that, go ahead and click the link in the description below, go watch the video, and then come back. Okay, now let's get into it. As we talked about last week, naturally cycling women will have a fluctuation of their hormones, where the sex hormones estrogen and progesterone will go up and down depending on where in the cycle the woman is. Since estrogen and progesterone do different things in the body, the cycle creates some kind of movement or flow in how we feel. But when we're on the pill, our hormones are more in a static state with no ovulation and therefore no spike in estrogen each month. Instead, it keeps estrogen low throughout the cycle, and with no ovulation and no rise in estrogen, you will likely get a different experience. So how does it feel to be in a static state with our hormones instead of having a fluctuating cycle? Well, are you on hormonal birth control, or do you have a natural cycle, and how do you feel? Our natural hormones do pretty cool things. We already talked about how progesterone causes our body to produce natural relaxation drugs. But it's not just progesterone that has all the cool benefits. Research suggests that estrogen can make rewarding things feel more rewarding. This means that pleasurable activities such as eating a good meal or making love to your partner can feel more pleasurable when estrogen is high. And this also makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, given that estrogen rises during ovulation, which is when we are the most fertile. So what happens when we take birth control and therefore miss out on those benefits? I read some interesting stuff in this book, How the Pill Changes Everything by Dr. Hill, and went ahead and checked out some research as well, which I have linked below if you want to learn more. So this one study looked at women's emotional state and how it can differ for women on the pill. Previous studies have shown that women on the pill have less variability in their emotional state than non-pill users. And again, going back to this chart, we can see that it makes sense in a way, right? We often hear about how the pill can be stabilizing to women's moods, but the interesting thing about this particular study was that it showed that the pill can dampen a woman's positive emotional response. And this characteristic is something that is seen in depression. Someone who's depressed shows very little signs of inspiration, interest, excitement, enthusiasm, and so on. Studies also show that women's brain reward system may be altered on birth control, and I'm referring to a study that showed that women on birth control, unlike naturally cycling women, did not experience activity in their reward center in the brain when looking at pictures of their romantic partners. Studies also show that the pill affects our testosterone levels, which then can lead to low libido and even depression. This is because a protein in your body called SHBG gets elevated on the pill, and this protein grabs onto your testosterone, causing less free testosterone to float around and do its job. I talk about birth control and libido in more detail in the first video I made on YouTube, titled The Birth Control Pill's Effect on Libido. If you haven't watched that already, I recommend you go check it out. I also want to mention that some women are struggling with mood symptoms that are not caused by birth control, and they go on the pill to manage those symptoms. And although some women choose to address and treat the underlying issue for these symptoms, others find birth control as a better solution for keeping these symptoms under control until perhaps they are ready to deal with them. This is your decision, so you do you. According to Elizabeth Kisling, a professor of women and gender studies, the long-term suppression of the menstrual cycle via birth control is the biggest uncontrolled medical experiment on women in history. Birth control became available to women in the 60s, and considering that almost all medical studies up until the 90s were done on men, we knew very little about the menstrual cycle even before birth control. So here we are trying to answer these questions about birth control and mood when we don't really have a proper base to do so. What I think is important now is that healthcare professionals start taking women seriously when it comes to birth control and mental health. And if you think that you're struggling mentally because of your birth control, I encourage you to go to a doctor that takes your concerns seriously as well. I hope you got some value from this video, and if you did, you can subscribe for more videos like this. Also make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of All About Hormonal Birth Control. Until then, take care, and I will see you soon.